Hi, welcome to Fish on Fridays. I'm Al McCauley. I so badly wanted to start this episode by saying, "Oh, be God, our saints be praised." That's the best Irish brogue I can offer right now. Today, I want to talk to you about probably one of the greatest, most loved saints in the Catholic Church, and that, of course, is St. Patrick. St. Patrick lived, born right at the end of the 4th century, 389, give or take, and he was born in Western Britain. He was not born in Ireland. He was not Irish. A lot of people know that, some people don't, but that's why I'm not wearing green. I'm wearing red and white because that's the color of the British flag. He was born probably in what we call Wales today, so Western Britain. And he lived a pretty comfortable life. His dad was a Roman figure, authority figure. He was like in the government. And when he was 15 or 16 years old, Irish raiders came across the Irish Sea, as they would do from time to time, and they would pillage villages, and they would take young people and kidnap them. And Patrick was unfortunately one of those people in one of these raids that was taken and kidnapped and taken back to Ireland. And they would take young people because they were easier to capture, easier to train, and easier to control. And they were strong. And so Patrick was taken back to Ireland and lived the life of a slave for 6 years. The majority of the time he served as a shepherd. Now, I'm going to stop right there, and you might say, well, how do we know all this? He wrote an autobiography called Confessions, and he tells us a lot about what we know about him comes from this manuscript, this book. And he tells us that he was a shepherd. And boy, I tell you, what a lonely life, what a miserable life it would have been. He was not somebody who was really... As a young man, he was not interested in his faith. He didn't study the catechism like he should. And boy, the solitude, the time alone, given the oppression in his life as a slave, he would have recognized, came to recognize, I should say, that Christianity was important to him. He understood that God was calling him to something greater. And after about 6 years, he had a dream that inspired him to go to the coast. And long story short, he is going to secure passage on a boat out. By the way, just him being able to go from slavery to get to the coast and get somebody to take him on board, to take him to freedom, is a miracle in and of itself, because chances are he would have been captured relatively easily. So to avoid all that has to have been some kind of miracle. But anyway, he goes back home. He's reunited with his folks. He has this continual calling to become a priest. So he goes to Gaul, which is present-day France, and he studies to be a priest. He keeps hearing voices of the people that he had met, some of the Irish citizens who were being oppressed by the Druid class. These are pagan, pre-Christian religious people. They were really the holders of the power over the chieftains and the clans that were in Ireland at the time. And they purported to have almost magical properties and spells and the like. And so he was having these dreams about going back and teaching them about the one true God, the triune God, actually. And so he was given the title of bishop, appointed bishop, so he could baptize, and he was sent back on his way. And for the next 30 plus years, he's going to stay in Ireland. So even though he wasn't born in Ireland, he is clearly adopted by the Irish, and every bit as important as anybody who was born there. So, but he, in that 30 plus years, he is going to be just a miracle worker. He's a dynamo. He's going to found monasteries throughout the island. He's going to challenge the powers that be. And in the process, he is going to really elevate the status of women, which was probably unheard of at that time because they were more or less cattle that were property to be owned by either your father or your husband. So he's going to elevate the status of women. He is going to almost single-handedly end the practice of human sacrifice, which was part of the Druidic culture, without shedding any blood. He's not going to have to go to war to do these things. It's just the power of his words, the power of the Christian message, the power of the gospel is going to convert hearts. It's going to change their hearts toward love. And what's going to result is something that we collectively refer to as Celtic Christianity is going to be the lighthouse, the beacon, if you will, for all of what's going to happen in Europe. So what's happening in Europe at this time is something I would suggest wrongfully call the Dark Ages. But we have waves of barbarian invasions that are coming from the north and from the east into continental Europe, places like Germany and France and into Italy and Spain. And where they're not going is Ireland. So what Patrick is able to do, and his followers, monks, hundreds and thousands of them, they're able to keep the light of education alive in Ireland. They are the places, the repository for art and artifacts and texts that have been smuggled to the monasteries in Ireland for safekeeping, while Rome burns, basically, while Europe is really being besieged by these barbarian hordes that are overtaking them. And so Ireland will then, once that settles down in the continent of Europe, Ireland, those monks, they're going to disseminate all that information back, and that's going to be the burgeoning of things like the university system throughout Europe, etc., and really bring back classical education and whatnot. So the impact of this man is just unbelievably important. Now, unfortunately, we think of St. Patrick every March 17th, and a lot of people will dress in green, again, wrongly, because he wasn't born Irish, but that's okay. And they will drink beer and maybe some whiskey. And I wonder about that too, because Patrick wasn't the biggest drinker in the world. In fact, he had very little patience for his monks who would get drunk, because he would say, you let yourself get out of control, and then you acted reprehensibly if you were, sloppy drunk. So it's kind of an I guess, ironic twist that we celebrate this man who wasn't the biggest drinker in the world to, have a pint or five on St. Patrick's Day. But I digress. One of the other lasting things, legacies of St. Patrick that I'd like to share with you is something called Patrick's breastplate. And it's too long to read to you now, but it's something that if you're not familiar with it, I would ask you to look this up on the internet or find a book. Just type in on your internet search, St. Patrick's breastplate. A breastplate is a weapon of war. It's a defense mechanism. It's the strongest piece of metal you wear, and you wear it over your chest to protect your vital organs when you're under siege by by an opposing army, let's say. And so in this regard, it's a prayer. And he's saying this prayer is your breastplate. This is your protection. This is all you need. And I just want to read one or two lines from it because I think it just gives us an insight into Patrick and his legacy. Now, let me say this one last thing before I read this little clip here, is that we don't think he wrote this. We don't know if he did, but it certainly oozes St. Patrick. It really gives us, it points to him, and it was certainly in the spirit and the vein of his teaching. So let me just read some of this. And again, you might have heard this, but I love this. He says, Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ when I arise, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me, Christ in every eye that sees me, and Christ in every ear that hears me. What a wonderful blessing this is. Again, this is just a small snippet from the larger prayer, but he's somebody who is so Christocentric in his prayer that reminds us that we should think, how often do we invoke Christ? Do we recognize that Christ surrounds us, penetrates us, that Christ is to our left and to our right, above and below, that Christ has our back, if you will? Do we think about our lives that, so people who hear me will think of Christ. People who speak of me will think of Christ. People who see me. How am I acting? How am I talking? How am I carrying myself? Am I being Christian? Because I may be the only Bible someone ever reads. I've got to be that Christian. I've got to act and speak a certain way. And so what a powerful legacy from this man. He's going to inspire millions, and we still celebrate him today as this wonderful, heroic, early church, really, figure in our history. One last thing I'll say, just I think is fascinating, is in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28, Jesus says, go to the ends of the earth and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, if you could look at a map of Europe at the time of Patrick, right around the year 400, if you could look at a map of Europe, they have no clue that North and South America exist yet. They have no clue that China exists or Australia. They think that's their known world, which is why the Mediterranean is called what it is. The Mediterranean Sea. Meta meaning middle, terrain meaning earth. It's the middle of the known world. And so Ireland, if you could see this map in your mind's eye, if you're looking at it, all the way to the top left-hand corner is this little island called Ireland. It was on the farthest, remotest part of the known world. And so Patrick is literally taking Christ's message from Matthew 28, go to the ends of the earth and baptize. He's doing that. He's doing that before anybody else. In fact, I would suggest he's the first Christian to go as far away from Rome and proselytize and spread the gospel as a Christian than anybody else. So, I mean, what a heavy hitter, what a profound guy, somebody to know and love. But anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's something you think about when we have St. Patrick's Day and you celebrate. If you do have a beard, maybe, keep it to one or less. But you do what you want, celebrate how you do. But just remember to invoke his name and think about his legacy. I hope this has been helpful. Would love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you'd follow us on Facebook. But either way, we're so grateful that you tune in on Fridays for Fish on Fridays. Until next time, be good to each other and God bless.